When my son told me, "Find another place to die, you're useless now," I packed my bags like the obedient mother I'd always been. 3 days later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, learning that my supposedly loving husband had just played the longest chess game of his life, and Daniel was about to learn that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. If you're watching this, don't forget to subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, let me tell you how I went from being a homeless widow to a woman holding all the cards. Because, darling, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. 2 months ago, I was Margaret Sullivan, devoted wife of 43 years, mother to a spectacularly ungrateful son. When Robert died of a heart attack at 71, I thought my world was ending. Daniel swooped in during my grief like a vulture in a designer suit, wrapping his fake concern around words drenched in manipulation. "Mom, you can't handle this big house alone. The stairs, the maintenance, all those memories. It's just not healthy." I should have seen the calculation behind his compassion. Daniel had always been Robert's favorite. His little man, his prodigy. When Daniel married Isabella, an ambitious investment banker, Robert worshipped the ground they walked on. Meanwhile, I was just the woman who cooked, cleaned, and made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. After the funeral, Daniel became relentless. He'd bring Isabella for dinner, armed with brochures of retirement communities and real estate listings. "Mom, these places are amazing. People your age, activities, no responsibilities." What they meant was no inheritance to split and no inconvenient mother to manage. The final blow came last Tuesday. I was still living in our home, the same one Robert and I had built brick by brick, while Daniel and Isabella stayed in the guest room. I hadn't had the strength to move out of our bedroom yet. That morning, Daniel arrived unannounced, dragging 2 large suitcases behind him. "Mom, we've made a decision," he said, his voice clipped with finality. "Isabella just got promoted. We're moving to the city. This house, it's perfect for us." I blinked. "Perfect for you?" "Daniel, this is my home." His mask slipped, for just a second, revealing the cold steel beneath. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it. I've let you stay here out of kindness. But now it's time you find your own place." The words hit like a physical blow. "Daniel, there must be some mistake." "No mistake. Dad knew I'd handle things better than you ever could. You never understood money, investments. You were just the wife. Just the wife." 43 years reduced to 3 words. Then came the killing strike. "Find another place to die, Mom. You're useless now." So I packed. 43 years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice, stuffed into 2 suitcases and a small box of photos. Daniel stood at the doorway, glancing at his watch like I was making him late for something important. "There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street," he said, with the cheerfulness of a hotel clerk. "Very affordable. I'm sure they have vacancies." Affordable. My son was inheriting $33 million and suggesting I move into what was essentially subsidized housing for the elderly. Isabella didn't meet my eyes as Daniel loaded my bags into their BMW, her silence a stamp of complicity. "Mom, you'll love being independent again," Daniel said, not even looking at me. "No more home maintenance, no more property taxes." He meant no more home, period. As we drove away, I watched my house, our house, vanish in the rearview mirror. The irony was cruel. I'd spent decades turning that place into a home, hosting birthdays, nursing Robert through illness, polishing every memory. Now I was being dropped off at a budget motel like discarded furniture. The Sunset Inn cost $49 a night. Thin walls, thinner towels, a carpet older than my son. Daniel handed me $200 in cash, the way you'd tip a housekeeper. This should cover you for a few days. I'll have Kevin transfer money once the estate paperwork clears." After they left, I sat on the sagging mattress and tried to process what had just happened. In less than 3 hours, I'd gone from grieving widow to homeless senior. The boy I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for had abandoned me like an expired coupon. But as I stared at the faded floral wallpaper, something tugged at my mind. Robert had always been meticulous, obsessive, even, about his finances. Years ago, he'd shown me his documents, explaining every clause. I was certain this wasn't what he wanted. Robert could be traditional, even stubborn, but cruel? Never. The next morning, I used the motel's patchy Wi-Fi to search for Robert's attorney, Harrison Fitzgerald. He'd handled all our real estate and business affairs. His office was downtown, 20 minutes by bus, a costly trip with what little cash I had, but necessary. When I walked in, Harrison looked genuinely shocked. "Margaret, my dear, I've been trying to reach you. I called the house several times, but Daniel said you were traveling." "Traveling?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I need to ask about Robert's will." "Of course. Daniel didn't provide you with your copy?" He frowned, pulling a thick file from his cabinet. I gave him the original and several copies after the reading. My stomach dropped. There was a reading? "Margaret, you were supposed to be there. Daniel said you were too distraught and he'd handle everything." The room blurred. "Mr. Fitzgerald, Daniel told me he inherited everything. He said Robert left me nothing." The old lawyer's eyes hardened with alarm. "That's impossible. Your husband was very specific about your inheritance." He opened the file, retrieving a document I recognized instantly, Robert's neat signature at the bottom. But as Harrison began to read, the world shifted beneath my feet. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, leave to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Furthermore, I bequeath to her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. My vision blurred. $23 million. The house. 70% of everything. And to my son, Daniel Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million to be held in trust, with distributions commencing on his 45th birthday, contingent upon his treatment of his mother following my death. Contingent upon his treatment of his mother. Robert knew. Somehow he knew exactly what Daniel would try to do. I looked up at Harrison, my voice trembling. Daniel said I inherited nothing. He showed me documents. "Margaret, what Daniel did is elder fraud, and a crime. Those documents were either forged or outdated drafts. Your husband updated his will 6 months before his passing, specifically because he was worried about Daniel's entitlement. All those dinners, those conversations where Daniel dismissed me, rolled his eyes, treated me like a burden. Robert had seen it all. He'd made plans." "There's more," Harrison said, his voice steady. "The trust clause states that if Daniel fails to treat you with dignity and respect after Robert's death, his entire inheritance reverts to you." I stared at him, stunned. "You mean Daniel just lost $10 million? "Yes. His inheritance is now yours. You don't just inherit $23 million, Margaret. You inherit 33, plus the house and all personal property." The irony was poetic. Daniel's greed had triggered the very clause meant to protect me from him. "What do I do now?" I whispered. Harrison smiled softly. "Now, my dear, we call the police. And then, we call Daniel. He's about to get the shock of his life." Harrison's office became command central within the hour. His paralegal, a brisk woman named Beth, moved like a metronome through calls to banks, the pension administrator, and the county recorder. Each time she said my son's name, she added, "Note potential breach of fiduciary duty," like a stamp. Detective Mira Patel returned Harrison's voicemail faster than I expected. Her tone was warm steel. Mrs. Sullivan, I'd like a statement about how your son removed you from your residence. We'll also request a... Hearing those words, bar him from the property, set something right in my bones. For days I had felt like a guest in my own life. Now the house had a boundary, and Daniel was on the wrong side of it. By noon, accounts linked to Robert's estate were frozen, the utility transfers reversed, and a locksmith scheduled. Harrison slid a yellow legal pad toward me. What must you retrieve when we re-enter the home with the sheriff? I wrote, jewelry box, photos, marriage license, Robert's notebooks, my passport, prescription list, grandmother's quilt. I paused, then added, dignity. At 3:17, my phone lit up with Daniel. I let it go to voicemail and then pressed play on speaker with Harrison listening. My son's voice, always persuasive when cornered, tried for innocent outrage. Mom, the bank's having some glitch. The cards declined. The broker says he can't move forward with the listing. Did you do something? Why are you making this harder? I called him back because some conversations should be witnessed. Hello, Daniel. I'm at Harrison Fitzgerald's office. I kept my voice as calm as a lake before a storm. He's the attorney who read your father's will in a room where, strangely, I was absent. A beat of silence. You were distraught, he said. I thought I'd spare you. You spared me my home, my accounts, my safety. I inhaled. Your father left me the house and 70% of the estate. Your share is in trust, contingent on how you treat me. You failed the test before the flowers from the funeral had wilted. Those clauses are suggestions, he snapped. You'll burn through the money, Mom. You never understood investments. Let me manage the portfolio. Harrison leaned toward the phone. Mr. Sullivan, this is counsel. All future contact with my client will be through me. Detective Patel will reach you for a statement. The line went dead so abruptly that the dial tone felt like a slammed door. We met the sheriff's deputy and the locksmith at 847 Oakwood, just as the afternoon light turned honey-colored. The elm threw lacework shadows across the porch. My fern, my cheerful, ridiculous porch fern, sat browning near the curb like trash. Detective Patel shook my hand with a grip that said, I believe you. Ms. Sullivan, we'll start inside. If Mr. Sullivan arrives, do not engage. He arrived before the new deadbolt did, tires shrieking like adolescents. He stepped from his SUV in a suit that broadcast authority and desperation at once. You can't lock me out of my house, he declared. It isn't your house, I said, surprised by my own evenness. It never was. Detective Patel showed him the emergency order. He glanced at it, and then at me, the way a bully weighs whether the teacher will actually keep standing there. This is family, he said to her, as if the word created immunity. That's why the statute applies, she replied. Hand Mrs. Sullivan the keys. He held the ring for a second longer than necessary, then tossed it like a dare. The keys hit my palm. I felt the weight of metal and the weight of a life returning. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon oil, like every Saturday I ever cleaned. On the coffee table lay a glossy brochure, Open Concept Kitchen Dreams. Isabella had circled demo wall in pink pen and scribbled a heart. I gathered the shoebox of photographs I had left by the fireplace, slid Robert's leather notebook into my tote, and walked down the hall to the office we used to call his study, and I now called mine. Beth cataloged items for the record. The detective photographed Daniel's suitcases by the door, the brochure, the dent Daniel had put in the baseboard when the locksmith turned the new bolt with a firm click. On my desk sat a tiny cream envelope I didn't remember seeing in the file at Harrison's office. My name was on it in Robert's precise hand. Laney, for when you need it. I smiled despite myself. He never stopped calling me that in private, even when Margaret was what the world used. Inside was a safety deposit key and a note. First Town Bank, Box 317, 2 recordings. A list. Take George. Robert had anticipated a version of this day. My hands shook, lightly, the way a person trembles after the danger passes and the truth arrives. We left with the sheriff, changed locks behind us, and drove to the bank where the manager recognized Harrison and ushered us to a small room. The narrow metal box, scuffed by decades of careful hands, slid onto the table. Inside, 2 USB drives labeled for Elaine and for court. Robert never stopped teasing me by writing my middle name when he wanted formality, and a spiral notebook filled with dates, ticks, and tidy columns. The man had logged life like an engineer. He had counted what mattered. We watched the video on the first drive in the privacy room because waiting felt like betrayal. Robert sat at his desk wearing that green sweater with the darned elbow. His eyes were the calm blue of someone who has already made peace with the storm. If you're seeing this, Lainey, it means my hands can't fix what needs fixing. I know our boy. I love him, but I know him. I've built a fence. If he honors you, he gets what he needs. If he tries to take, what would have gone to him returns to you. You won't. The second video was addressed to any authority with an interest. Robert, polite as a hammer, explained his reasons for the trust clause, described previous incidents where Daniel had shown entitlement that worried him, referenced conversations with Harrison, and listed the accounts for corroboration. It was less a recording than a bridge I hadn't known I'd need. We left the bank into a sky the color of soft denim. On the curb, Harrison cleaned his glasses even though they were spotless. Next steps, he said. Return you home with the order. Notify the broker and record title. File a motion to confirm the will. Mirrored notice to every institution. If Daniel appears, you call me in 911. No doorstep negotiations. I'm not the woman who left that house 2 nights ago, I told him. The truth of it surprised me as it left my mouth. I can see that, he said, a rare smile warming his courtroom face. That night at the motel, exhaustion hit me like a wave and then retreated, leaving me alert. I studied the spiral notebook page titled Contingencies for Daniel. Robert had written, in his square hand, tell truth, keep receipts, resist guilt masquerading as love. It felt like a blessing and a dare. The next morning, Beth texted, Patel meeting at 9 a.m. for re-entry. Her efficiency was a lifeline. We pulled onto Oakwood behind the county cruiser. My porch fern, resurrected from the curb by Detective Patel's quiet kindness, sat back in its corner. Small victories are still victories. Daniel was waiting. He paced the walkway, fury in every step. You think this is over? He said, low, when I stepped from the car. No, I said. I think it's beginning. His phone buzzed. He glanced down and blanched. Why would the bank deny my access to a safe deposit? He muttered to himself. Then louder, you went through Dad's things. I went through my husband's wishes, I replied. Something you should have done before you tried to rewrite them. Detective Patel asked for his keys. He surrendered them with a little laugh that sounded too much like a sob. The locksmith finished. The house exhaled. I could feel it. By late afternoon, the phone started. A reporter from Channel 7 Investigates left a voicemail. We're covering elder exploitation trends. Would you be willing to talk? Your story could help others. I wasn't ready to lay my wound on a table for strangers to prod, but I filed her number between courage and caution. At dusk, while I chopped an apple with the motel's plastic knife, an envelope appeared under my door. No stamp. Just my name in a feminine, looping hand I knew as well as my own. Robert's sister wrote like that. But the letter was from someone else. Margaret, if you are reading this, then what I feared has happened. Not all that funds our life is clean. I made choices long ago before you knew me. I did it to secure our future and to shield Daniel from the kind of men who would own him. If he discovers the truth, he might try to use it against you. Protect yourself. Forgive me if you can. R. My husband never signed with an initial, and yet the voice was his. Tender, precise, aware of how words could wound less if placed carefully. I carried the letter to Harrison like a person carries a live coal. He read it twice. "We'll need a forensic accountant regardless," he said. "If there's contamination in later accounts, federal counsel could sniff around. But Margaret, I think this is context, not confession. Let's not borrow fires until we see smoke." No sooner had I left his office than Daniel called again. "Mom, we need to talk in person." His tone had calcified. "I have information about Dad that will change everything. Meet me at the house, alone." "Not alone," I said. "At 10 a.m., my living room, with Harrison present." "Then I'll send what I have to the press," he snapped. Headline, "Widow's fortune built on dirty money." "Send it," I said, and surprised myself again. Truth survives headlines. At 10 the next morning, he arrived carrying a manila folder, the swagger back on like a jacket. I kept the chain on the door until Harrison stood at my shoulder. Daniel dropped the folder on the coffee table. "Wire transfers," he announced. "Offshore accounts, shell charities, names like Argent Holdings and Solaris Trust, all tied to a fixer named Victor Lang. Do you know who Lang is, Mom? He launders money. And Dad worked with him, before you ever met." I felt the floor shift. "You're lying," I said, because it was the only sentence that could stand. "Check the dates," he said. 20 years back, before your wedding. He used fake charities to move funds. That's how he bought this house. That's how he started his business. You've been living in a museum of crime proceeds." Harrison's mouth became a line. He paged through the documents. "These aren't obvious fakes," he said finally. "We'll need verification." Daniel leaned in, smelling like expensive cologne and panic. "Drop the charges, restore my access, and this goes away. Or I go to the feds and to every newsroom in the state. They'll seize everything under RICO. You'll have nothing." Fear tried to crawl up my spine with cold little feet. I pressed my palms flat on the table until the wood steadied me. "Get out," I said. "All further communication through counsel." He left with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tick-tock," he said. Detective Patel brought a financial crimes liaison that afternoon. Agent Dana Reeves had a badge, a navy blazer, and a face that announced she had already seen the worst and kept going. She studied the folder. "Lang is very real," she said. "He's on our radar. If these flows touched your current assets, seizure is possible. But there's something else." She closed the folder. "Your husband contacted us in the months before he died. He was providing information. It appears he may have been working to Disma." I stared. "Robert?" She nodded. "We don't call informants heroes, Mrs. Sullivan. We call them necessary. He left files with an intermediary. We didn't receive all of them. We think someone intercepted a cache, likely your son. If Daniel is using those documents as leverage, he is in more danger than he understands." I felt an impossible mixture of relief and grief. Relief that my husband might not have been the man Daniel painted. Grief at the years I hadn't known the war he might have been fighting behind the calm of our breakfasts. Agent Rowan's badge flashed under the porch light like a small, decisive sunrise. Behind her, 2 unmarked sedans idled at the curb, breath pluming from their tailpipes into the cool evening air. She stepped inside without theater, eyes taking in the lamp pool on Robert's desk, the flash drive beneath my palm, and the terror ringing my son's face like a halo he didn't want. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said evenly, "I need you and your son to step away from the window. We have credible information that associates of Victor Lang may attempt to recover materials tonight." Daniel swallowed. "I didn't tell them 8, he murmured, as if bargaining with fate. "I told them 9. Agent Rowan's gaze didn't flicker. They rarely honor calendars. She nodded toward the drive. "Is that part of your husband's materials?" "It is," I said. "There's more. Videos, a notebook, account lists. He left them for me. For court, too." Rowan's jaw set with something like respect. Your husband took risks most people would not. I don't say that lightly. She keyed her radio once. All units, stage 2. From the kitchen and the back hallway, 2 more agents appeared like practical ghosts. Their presence steadied the room. Daniel sank into the desk chair and pressed both hands over his mouth, the posture of a man who has finally run out of rehearsed lines. Rowan moved to the broken window, scanned the darkness beyond the lilac bush, and spoke softly into her mic. Perimeter? Clean for now, came a tinny reply. Black SUV circling the block, same plates as the coffee shop lot. Rowan turned back to us. Mrs. Sullivan, I need your consent to take custody of any evidence your husband left related to Lang. We'll receipt every item. In exchange, you'll get something most people never feel in a case like this. Daylight. Take it, I said, but I want one thing in return. Her brow rose. Name it. When this is over and safe, I want a record, formal, signed, that says what Robert did. I want my grandchildren to read it without guessing. You'll have it, she said. I promise you the paper and the truth. Headlights ghosted across the wall again. A shadow detached from the hedges, then another. Rowan raised 2 fingers, wait, and then 1, now. The house erupted into quiet choreography, an agent at the back door, one at the side, Rowan herself taking the front with a stance that made the floorboards trust her. The first man stepped onto the sill of the shattered window, body coiled, and froze at Rowan's voice. Federal agents. Don't test the physics of this situation. He measured his options, found only one that didn't end with his face in my rug, and held up empty hands. 2 more were pinned and cuffed in the garden before their boots muddied my runner. Within minutes, the night grew still. A held breath let out. Rowan holstered her weapon and turned to Daniel. Mr. Sullivan, you're going to tell me exactly who contacted you, exactly what they asked for, and exactly what you promised. If you want that to matter, you will do it on the record. His voice came like gravel. I couldn't close a deal. A man named Grady brought me to someone who said he worked with Lang. He saw a copy of a ledger I had, one from the folder, said they'd wipe my debt if I delivered the drives. You were prepared to trade your mother's life for your balance sheet, Rowan said without dramatics, which made the sentence land even harder. You will spend a long time making amends. Daniel nodded, eyes wet in a way that wasn't performance. Tell me how. Rowan pointed to the chair at the dining table. Start with the truth. We'll build from there. They recorded a statement that lasted past midnight. Facts placed their small weights on the table until even the air felt level. Rowan inventoried what I turned over. The drive labeled for Court, the companion labeled for Elaine, the spiral notebook of contingencies, the cream envelope with Robert's hand. Every item received a bag, a signature, a chain of custody. I signed my name more times than I had in years, and felt steadier with each loop of ink. At 2 a.m., Rowan paused her pen. You need sleep. We'll post a unit at the curb. Lock your doors. If anyone you didn't invite knocks, call 911, then me. She tapped her card on the desk. We move on Lang at dawn. After the agents left, the house felt different. Not haunted by fear, but newly hollowed of it, like a cavity cleaned and ready to heal. Daniel stood, awkward and used up, in the doorway of the study. Mom, he said, voice small with the humility that only consequence can teach. I'm sorry. I looked at the boy who brought me creek rocks, at the man who signed my eviction. Both were true. You're late, I said, and then, because the truth keeps its balance with mercy, I added, but not too late to begin. He slept on the sofa, beneath the quilt my grandmother pieced from dresses she wore to weddings and wakes. I slept in my own bed for the first time in weeks, the mattress lifting me instead of accusing me. Morning came soft and gold. At 7:14, Harrison texted, "Judge signed final order confirming will. Title recorded. Trust reversion documented. Coffee?" I replied, "Later, the FBI is moving." By 9, it wasn't just moving. It was everywhere. News helicopters stitched circles over downtown. Sirens braided through streets. Rowan called at 10:02. "We have Lang," she said, "and his accountant, his runner, his shell signatories. Your husband's files, combined with your son's statement, gave us the threading we needed. We're serving seizures. I'll be by at 1. I hung up and cried the kind of cry that cleans rather than breaks. It lasted 1 minute, maybe 2. Then I made the bed, watered the resurrected fern, and brewed coffee that tasted like a future. Rowan arrived on time with a thin folder and a tired smile that reached her eyes. "First," she said, "your safety. We've cleared your address from any active threat. Second, your assets. Treasury Forensic traced your current accounts. The funds are clean as of the date your husband began cooperation. The earlier contaminated flows were quarantined in seizures from Lang's side. You will not face forfeiture." I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I'd been hoarding. "And Robert?" Rowan slid a document across the table. At the top, United States v. Lang et al., Exhibit J, Declaration of Cooperating Source DT7714. Beneath it, a still frame from Robert's recording. He looked right at me with that half-smile he saved for hard jobs. The declaration summarized 12 years of quiet service, the payments authorized, the limits observed, the specific harm prevented. At the bottom, a line that undid me gently. The source undertook these actions in part to protect his spouse and to deter his son's susceptibility to exploitation. I touched the page. "He saw it," I whispered. "He saw all of it." Rowan nodded. "He prepared you. And when you needed to, you prepared yourself." She paused. "There's one more matter. Your son. We intend to charge him with fraud related to the forged will papers and attempted obstruction. His cooperation today will reduce exposure, but he will face consequences." "I know," I said. The words tasted like medicine. Not sweet, not cruel, necessary. "He'll make a statement to the press that I approve. No more spin. He'll apologize in court. He'll accept the sentence." Rowan considered me for a long second. "You would have made a terrifying prosecutor," she said, and then smiled. "Or a saint." "I'll settle for functional mother," I said. "One who finally stopped mistaking guilt for love." That afternoon, we drafted the statement together. Daniel read it aloud to a cluster of microphones that suddenly looked very small. He said the words in his own voice. No crocodile tears, no hooks for sympathy. I forged papers, exploited my mother's grief, and endangered her life. I tried to barter stolen evidence to erase a debt I created. I am responsible for what I did. My mother chose to protect me anyway, by stopping me. I'm grateful she did. Reporters shouted questions about prison time and deals. He didn't answer. Some truths are complete at one period. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The courtroom smelled like old wood and new disinfectant. The judge, a woman with a gaze that could slice fabric, read the charges, the cooperation memo, the letters, including mine. Daniel received 20 months in a federal facility, plus restitution to cover the motel, the locksmith, the legal costs, and the cost of repairing the window his choices had invited strangers to break. He didn't look at me when they cuffed him. He looked at the floor, and I was glad. Sometimes that is the path to looking up. Life rearranged itself around the space he left. I met with a financial advisor who listened more than she spoke. We set up a small foundation in Robert's name to fund legal aid for elders facing family exploitation. I called Leah Kim at Channel 9 and told our story on my terms, not because I wanted the attention, but because silence helps thieves. The letters began to arrive, handwritten, shaking, grateful, from women and men who had been told by their own children to find somewhere else to grow old. We mailed back checklists, scripts for hard conversations, and a one-page guide titled, "Keep Your Keys." Spring put green lace on the elm outside my window. The study became my room, truly. I painted the walls a color called Morning Walk, moved Robert's desk to face the light, and hung a corkboard where I pinned a single index card. Keep receipts. Tell the truth. Resist guilt, masquerading as love. Under it, I thumbtacked the still frame of Robert in his green sweater so he could keep watching me do the work he trusted me to finish. Daniel wrote from the facility in sentences that had learned humility. He described the financial literacy class he was assisting with, the men who asked him how to budget for the first time at 40, the old pride rising in him when he could help, and the new shame that kept it tethered. He did not ask me for money. He asked me for my grandmother's biscuit recipe. I sent it, and a story about how she taught me to cut the butter into the flour with just enough pressure, no more, or you make paste instead of dinner. He wrote back that he understood. Isabella filed for divorce. When she asked to meet, I agreed, in a cafe with big windows and small tables. She cried in a quiet way that didn't ask me to mop it. "I didn't know," she said. But I also didn't ask. I loved the house. I loved the life. I didn't love the work of seeing the truth. I nodded, because some confessions need no sermon. She left with half the furniture she'd picked out, and a book list I slipped across the table titled Boundaries with People You Love. On a Thursday salted with sunlight, Agent Rowan returned with a final folder. "Case closed," she said, tapping the cover. "You asked for paper. Here's the story your grandchildren will read." She handed me an embossed copy of the Declaration, a commendation letter noting Robert's cooperation, and a victim's rights acknowledgement with my name spelled correctly. "You did well," she added softly. "And by the way, your fern looks alive." "It is," I said. "Everything that belongs here is." We stood on the porch while the city went on with its errands. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Teach a class at the community center," I said. "Budget basics, reading contracts, scams families run on families. I think I'll call it Keep Your Keys." Rowan laughed. "Invite our office. We'll bring brochures and bad coffee." "Bring yourself," I said. "I like the way you explain."